All right, everybody, welcome back. Here we go. You're joining us by stream and you have a comment or a prayer request or a question, you can get in touch with us through these methods here, and we would love to hear from you. Let's begin our time this blessed Easter morning with a prayer. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. The attitudes that are inside of me, the thoughts, the mind that run across my head, places that are dark, I am so accustomed to, I don't even realize that they're there. Bring me an awareness, bring me a spirit of repentance. Let nothing, O God, stand in the way of our relationship with Jesus. Today, the Word of God, by the power of the Holy Spirit, will offer us an opportunity to be changed into the likeness and the nature of Jesus. Let us not miss this opportunity. I added to your notes this week a definition of what the word premise means so that we would all be on the same page about what that is. But I'm not going to go over the premise because we have touched on that. But kind of before I start, I'd like to share this with you this is a paragraph is from some notes that I had as I was looking back through some of my papers, that Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is the proclamation of the end of religion. It's not the start of a new religion or even of the best of all religions. If the cross is a sign of anything, it's a sign that God has gone out of the religion business. He has solved all the world's problems without requiring a single human being to do a single religious thing. What the cross is a sign of is this: that religion can't do a thing about the world's problems. That it never did work, religion didn't, and it never will. In a note that I sent to all of the daycare parents this week, I had a paragraph that read, "The bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead is the crowning fruit of Christianity." This is the linchpin right here. If the resurrection did not take place, then Christianity is a false religion. If it did take place, then Christ is God and the Christian faith is yes. Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is not the way. Christianity is about a relationship, because Jesus is the way. Page 2 of your notes in John chapter 19, we read, "There stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister. And Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved," which was of course John, "standing by. He said to his mother, 'Woman, behold your son.' He said to John the disciple, 'Behold your mother.' From that hour that disciple took her to his own home. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the Scriptures might be fulfilled, said, 'I thirst.' Now a vessel full of sour wine was sitting there, and they filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a hyssop, and put it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, 'It is finished,' and bowing his head, he gave up his spirit." I don't know about you. My notes right after that, I put the words, "I'm impressed." Today's message is on the subject of what impresses Jesus. Now, you and I might not, it's like the older we get, the less we care if we impress anybody or not. But if we can remember back when we were a little younger, we wanted to impress a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a teacher or a mentor or our daycare director or whatever. And still, even at whatever age, we find ourselves in situations where we would like for someone to like us, or we would like to come across good, or we'd like to make a good impression for whatever, for whatever the reason might happen to be. But as adults, we don't really think of and use the word impress, and we don't, unless we're talking about something that we were impressed by, then we'll use that word. But we don't generally think of ourselves as trying to impress someone, and yet that probably is the correct word to describe what we do. Like I say, less of as we get older, but what we do from time to time, periodically. Last Tuesday, I talked to the lady who owns the other building that we're looking at, and what I wanted to do was to impress her. I wanted her to like me. So we still do it. We just don't think about using that particular word. But here in John chapter 19, after all he had been through, for him to have this kind of devotion to his mother, the kind of presence of mind to speak to John, because you do understand that in this culture, a single woman wasn't. That's why if your husband died, you went to live with the next brother that was in line, because, well, if you were a single woman walking around in Jesus' day, you were a prostitute. Because there wasn't such thing as single women walking around in Jesus' day. So he had the presence of mind to make sure that his mother was taken care of. He was dying for the whole world and dying for his mother. He wanted to make sure that the physical needs that his mother would have would be met also, and I'm impressed for all he has been through, that he finished his life with concern for his mother. May have, but in a group of pastors one time, about 40 of us all having lunch together, and there was a couple of guys, a couple of priests from Belmont Abbey College who was there also, and it was the Christmas season. And the guy who was heading the meeting, about 40 pastors from about every different denomination you can think of. In fact, the guy leading the group was Lutheran. Said to the two priests from Belmont Abbey, we evangelicals have a different take and viewpoint and attitude towards Mary, but would you describe to us from the Catholic viewpoint, what your attitude is and how you view her and why? And so this guy, one of them got up and he talked for a few minutes about Mary and the role that she plays in the Catholic tradition, and he talked about that that we pray to Mary and those sorts of things. And then he said, "But there's one more thing I'd like to say concerning the subject of Mary. Always remember that nobody wants to hear anything bad said about her." I was probably in my early 20s when I heard that. Here I am 40 years later, and I still remember that. Nobody wants anybody to say anything bad about their mother. I had a couple of marriage jokes up to that point. I quit telling them. Those jokes didn't seem funny if I didn't think Jesus would laugh along with them. I'm impressed how at this point in his life he still made sure his mom was taken care of. And in John chapter 20, we find the disciples went away again to their own homes. That's what people do when they're hurt. hurt, they go home. But Mary, why did she go home? She didn't have one. Mary stood outside by the tomb weeping, and as she wept, she stooped down. And she saw two angels in white sitting, the head and the other feet of the body of Jesus. And I've often wondered if I had waited a little bit longer, if I might have seen an angel. But in my rush to get from one thing to the next, that I missed a meeting with God because I was too much in a hurry to get the things here. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they've taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they've laid him." And when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there and did not know it was Jesus. Why? Because Isaiah said that he was beat so bad he no longer resembled a human being. She said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, "Sir, if you carry him away, tell me who laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, you realize that at this point she has no idea who she's talking to. But let me assure you of this, ladies and gentlemen. When Jesus calls your name, you'll know it's him. Doesn't make any difference what it looks like that's talking to you. When Jesus calls your name, you'll know it's him. He turned and said to him, "Rabboni," which is to say, Jesus said to her, "Cling to me, for I've not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God." Talk about that for a week, but I'm not going to. Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and that he had spoken these things to her. In the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled, why? Fear of the Jews. Jesus came and stood in the midst and said to them what Jesus wants to say to all of us. And after that, in my notes, I wrote these two words. I'm for the first 200 years of Christianity, the cross was never preached. Preached was the resurrection. Because the resurrection was proof that Jesus was the Son of God, not dying on the cross. 1,000 men had died on the cross. None of them ever was raised from the dead. And what gave legitimacy to the things that the disciples went into all the world, sharing the gospel, what gave legitimacy to what they said was, we serve him who died on a cross, yes. Rose again. Oh, did what? And that gave credit to their freedom. So today, I want to talk to you about what impresses Jesus. In Luke chapter 7, we find a historical account that goes this way. Jesus concluded all of his sayings in the hearing of the people. He entered Capernaum. A certain centurion's servant was dear to him, was sick and ready to die. So when he heard about Jesus, he sent elders of the Jews to him, pleading with him to come and heal his servant. And when they, that would be the elders of the Jews, came to Jesus, they begged Jesus earnestly, saying that the one for whom he should do this was deserving. This centurion deserves you to do this, to heal his servant, for two reasons. He loves our nation, and he built us a church. Jesus went with them, and when he was already not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof. Therefore, I do not even think myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed, for I also am a man, placed under authority, having soldiers under me. Say to one, go, and he goes, to another, come, and he comes. Do my servant do this? He does it. Now look at verse 9 and 10. Jesus heard this. What? This understanding of authority. Marvel at the centurion. He turned around and said to the crowd that followed him, I say to you, I have not found such greater understanding. You know, says, faith. What's faith got to do with an understanding of authority? Here's the answer to that question. Everything. Our faith is hindered by our lack of understanding of the subject of spiritual authority. And those who live out from under it have placed themselves in the middle of the bullseye. Not even in Israel, and those who were sent returned to the house found the servant well. Now, Webster's 1828 edition reads that the definition of marvel is this. It's a wonder that which arrests the attention and causes a person to stand or gaze for the pause. All right, let's go back to verse 9. When Jesus heard these things, his attention was arrested. He stood still for a moment, and he paused, gathered his thoughts, and turned to the people and said, okay, that's what he did. He marveled. The Greek word translated marvel is also found in Mark chapter 6, which says a prophet, Jesus said, a prophet's not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house. Now he could look, and now he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them, and he marveled because of their unbelief. Then he went about the villages in a circuit, teaching. So the same arrest of attention, the causing of a person to stand or gaze, or to pause for a moment and reflect, he had that same feeling as he heard this account about this servant who was sick. He encountered that same emotion as he was endeavoring to minister in his own hometown. And actually, the verses before this said, hey, don't we know this guy? His brothers, they work here in the city, and we know his sisters. We know his mom. Because we know them, that he can't be who he says he is. And yet he was who he said he was. I think it's important before we understand what impresses Jesus, though, and I'm making an assumption that all of us want to know the answer. I think it's important for us to understand before we know what does impress him, as to look at what does impress him. Verses 4 and 5. And when they, the they there is the elders of the church, came to Jesus, they begged Jesus earnestly, saying that this centurion, for whom Jesus was going to do this, that the centurion was deserving. Why? For he loves our nation and has built us a church. Let's think about it. All of us have played elder all of our lives. God, you should love me. I'm a good person. I've never killed anybody. That idea that God loves those people who do things in order to be loved, is an idea counterculture completely to the gospel. The gospel, Jesus does not love us because we are good people, or because we go to church, or because we've been baptized, or because I send money to Compassion International every month, and I don't shoot my next door neighbor's dog who comes over and poops in my yard. I don't know, this stuff just comes to me, and I just sort of spit it out. Because, I mean, the only thing on my papers is what you see here, so all the rest of it's all made up as a go along anyway. But I don't shoot my neighbor's dog, so I'm a good person, God. I hear us do it in our praying sometimes. God, Susie Q is not feeling well. She's such a devoted person, God. What did we just do right there? We petitioned God on Susie Q's righteousness. I've heard 1,000 people pray that way, and go on and on. They've devoted their entire lives. Well, that's funny. He devoted his entire death to you. Now, which one of you got the trump card there? But see, we won't confront the stupidity that is under our own steeples, which is why the world is very happy. Because if we ignore it, they will throw it in our faces. Let me also say this. For he loves our nation and has built us a synagogue. And after he did that, he took a card and he stuck it up his sleeve. Not literally, but just stay with me, okay? He took a card and he slid it up under his sleeve. Love your nation, I built you a church. Now I got a servant who's sick. I want my paper back. There's a string attached to the gift within the gift. And you all heard me share with you before, my mother was the worst. Or, depending on your perspective, the best at it. Depending on your perspective. But my mother would offer me something and I would say, I don't know, is there any strings attached to it, Mom? But she recognized she was that way. But she recognized she was that way. And if I thought if she offered me $1 million and there was a string attached to it, I'd tell her, no, it's okay, just keep it. You know why? Because when she decided to pull that card out of her sleeve, that million had grown to $5 million. Everybody understand what I'm talking about here? That's what this guy did. Yeah, I love your nation. Yeah, I'm going to build you a church. Now then, when I want something, I'm going to expect you to... In fact, these guys dropped what they were doing and decided to become emissaries for this centurion. Hey, you don't. You'll be more than happy. Go and ask him on your behalf. And of course, what they're thinking is, we don't want you around. We're gonna pin Jesus' arm behind it. You should do this. Loves our nation. Built us a church. They wanted to be able to come back and say, look what we did for you. Because once you start a tit for tat, guess where that ends? Whenever one of you dies. Because somebody will always be expecting something else if he works for people in those Elder's mind, the score was 2-0. He's done something for us, but we haven't done anything for him. So let's help settle the score here. Let's get Jesus. And here's the other thing. I'd like us to notice that Jesus' value system is not the same as the elders. Jesus put the value on the sick servant. They put the value on the love of the centurion and the church building, which is exactly what most people in our religious... I catch what? Which is exactly what most people in our culture they do. So, let's move on. 4. Jesus was not impressed with the fact that he had built them a church, that he loved their nation. Now, let's note what Jesus was impressed with. Look at verse 2. A certain centurion servant, dear to him, the centurion, was sick and ready to die. What do we see here? Jesus is impressed with compassion. Here we go. See my notes right here. Look at them. Jesus was impressed with compassion. Webster's dictionary says compassion is a suffering with another. It's a painful sympathy. It's a sensation of sorrow excited by the distress or misfortunes of another. It's pity, commiseration. Compassion is a mixed passion compounded with two things: love and sorrow. What we need in our lives is more compassion and less of, well, I guess they're getting what they deserve. What we need in our lives is more compassion, love, and a genuine sorrow for whatever it is the person is going through. We need more compassion rather than saying, well, here's our expression. You ready? Guess what? They may very well have. That doesn't excuse us from being people of compassion. And what impresses Jesus is when you do run into someone who is getting what they deserve, and yet the life you live and the expression out of your heart and the fountain that flows from your belly is one of compassion and not one of Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, judge not. I remember the first time. I remember the first time my first mother-in-law. That sounds funny to say, doesn't it? I used to sell mobile homes for a living, though, and young couples would come in and tell me they were getting married and they wanted to buy, we want to buy a trailer. And at some point while we was walking around, I'd say, y'all are getting married? They go, yeah. I said, man, I've had 5 wives. I've enjoyed every one of them. Some of them would laugh. Some of them would look at me with real big eyes. Just kidding. But the first time one of the kids said to me, that's not fair. And I said back to them, life is not fair. Even God is not fair. My mother-in-law jumped. And I said to her, if God was fair, he'd give me what I deserve. If he was fair. I don't want to serve a God who is fair. I cannot stand what it is I deserve. And as we deal with others, we do not deal with them on the basis of what do they deserve. Well, they brought it on themselves. Well, you should have seen this coming. Well, you've done this 1,000 times. Have you not learned anything yet? You know that that statement right there has never fixed anyone? No one has ever heard that statement and gone, oh my God, you're right, I will never do it again, and not do it. But somehow or another, we think that the kitchen sink is fair arsenal in our argument. Follow that sentence. And we're happy to pull it out and throw the kitchen sink into the conversation. Jesus says, as we saw in those pictures, maybe what they need is a little compassion. Maybe what they need is a hug. Maybe what they need is to understand that you don't agree with what they did, but you still love them. That will impress Jesus. Number 2, verses 6. Verses 6 and 7. And Jesus went with them. And he was already not far from the house. The centurion sent friends to him, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself. I am not worthy that you should enter my roof. Therefore, I do not even think myself worthy to come to you. So what do we see here? We see that Jesus is impressed with humility. Webster's 1828 says that humility consists in lowliness of mind, the deep sense of one's own unworthiness. Now, in the sight of God, self-abasement, repentance for sin, and submission to the divine will. That's what humility is. So whatever your definition is, throw it out the door. Let's go with this one. Matter of fact, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3 says, Blessed are the poor in spirit. And what that means is, blessed are those who recognize they don't bring anything to the table. You play no part in your salvation. It is just as I am, without one plea, except this plea that thy blood was shed for me. That's it. We don't bring any righteousness. We don't bring any good deeds. We don't bring any heritage. We can't buy our way in. We can't bribe our way in. We can't ride under someone else's coattails. Of course, I'm going to heaven. I had a great-grandmother who was a saint. See, the problem with the gospel and the Bible Belt is that church is located in the Bible Belt. Churches in the Bible Belt, which I've lived here all my life, so I'm not a visitor like I'm talking about somebody else. The problem with churches in the Bible Belt is we've been inoculated to the gospel. You know what an inoculation is? That's where they give you a shot with a little bit of it in it. You get the whole thing. Like a flu shot. You realize that the flu's in a flu shot. You realize that COVID's in a COVID shot. Just enough of it to build up a resistance so that you don't get the whole thing. Problem is here in the South, we've done the same thing with the gospel. We have so twisted it around and taken just a little bit that has inoculated us to what the real truth of the Scripture is all about. I don't like hearing me at all. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. You know, thoughts on it. Inoculated to the gospel, so we won't get the whole thing. So let me just move on. Yeah. The USSR, United States, Southern. Humility is a deep sense of one's own unworthiness. I just want to tell you something. Secretly, this is something that I'm hammering at on the back of every sermon to try to get us all to understand. That We have a deep sense of our own unworthiness. And our worthiness is based on who we are in Jesus. Not on whether or not we got on the right kind of shoes, or whether or not our hair is orange, or whatever. Put your hair whatever you want to put it. I ain't looking at your head anyway. Trying to sense what's in your heart. You can't color that. Blessed are those who recognize I have nothing to give except what flows to me. Humility impresses Jesus. When we truly get a hold of the idea, I cannot do this. Verse 9, where we find number 3. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turned around and said to the crowd that followed him, I say to you, I've not found such great faith. In Israel, what do we see here? Jesus is impressed with faith, or, as you all know, I ask you to translate that word to the word trust whenever you read it. Jesus is impressed with our trusting in him, which our trusting in him is much easier when you realize you have nothing to trust in. But most people just don't recognize that. Webster's defines trust as a confidence, a reliance, or resting of the mind on the integrity, veracity, justice, friendship, or other sound principle. Oh God! Oh God! Do I want to live right there? I want to live in Trustville. Where what I'm doing is my life is when my mind is resting on God's integrity. You see? All right, okay. 15 yards. I'm just going to in advance. This is going to be a clipping penalty. So what worry is not, well, let me say this. What worry is not a mind at peace, because the mind is confident in the integrity. So worry means, I don't think I've got anything. You realize that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about worry more than any other subject. Now, most preachers, when they preach out of it, they preach out of chapter 5, and they go to the divorce thing, which Jesus doesn't even have divorce on his mind in those verses that are twisted there. But nonetheless, he talks about worry and condemns it more than anything else. Why? Because worry says, God, you have no integrity in your word. You said, do I not take care of the birds? Do I not dress the flowers? Well, do I not know what you have need of before you have known what you have need of? Have I not always taken care of you? Yeah, but that was then. I don't know what you're going to do now, and I'm scared, and he's going, give me a break. We're not talking about you. We're talking about how you do me. And you view me as a God with no integrity, no veracity. What is that? That is stick-to-it. Listen, when it gets tough, God's never going to look at you and go, whoo, I didn't sign up for this, and run off. That ain't happening. Because see, here's the thing. Before you knew it was going to get tough, he already knew it. And he already, in fact, he committed 2,000 years ago to go through that stuff. He just been waiting on you to get to that point. And when you got there, he was standing there and saying, you know what would be smart right now? Hold my hand. The smartest thing you can do. Hold my hand. Or what I'm asking for is, the smartest thing I can do is look in his eyes. You realize that when you're looking in somebody's eyes, you don't see much of anything else. You don't see anything else below their chin. You don't really see anything behind them when you're looking at somebody in the eye. That's how I'd like to live my life. I don't need to see the world. I need to see him. Let him see the world. Okay. I have a rest in my mind because of God's justice. And isn't this wonderful? Isn't this a wonderful depth? This is why I used the 1828 edition of Webster. The 1828 edition was the last edition that the person Daniel Webster actually had input on. And you can get these definitions www.webster1828.com. But isn't this a great definition right here? The resting of my mind, the friendship that I have with God Almighty. I have a rest because of his integrity. I have a rest because of his veracity. I have a rest because of his justice. And I have a rest because he is my best friend. Now, I'm not always his best friend. But he's always my best friend. So I want to close today with what impresses Jesus: compassion, humility, faith. Let's talk about faith for just a second. Faith. Trust. Word I prefer to use. Jesus is impressed with a trust that doesn't panic. What do I do when I panic? Look up. Your redemption draws nigh. Well, what do I do instead of panic? I'd suggest worship. A little prayer, a little singing, a little reading of his word. So what do I do when I'm faced with panic? I'll tell you something else I suggest and take advantage of quite often. Throw a temper tantrum. Now, I'm sure no preacher in the whole country is going to say that today. But this is the truth. Well, why would you say throw a temper tantrum? Because that's how you get it out. What you don't want is to keep it in. And let me tell you something. You can throw a temper tantrum you want, and you ain't scaring God at all. You'll be standing right there. When you get done, he'll go, you feel better? Get up. Hold my hand. He wants a trust. You face panic, it is just all balled up inside of you, and you are just scared to death. Bro. Scream. Oh. No, for extension. Cuss, jump up and down. Don't kick the dog. It's not the dog's fault. Okay? Don't kick the dog. But have yourself. Buy yourself. Because it would be better for you to have it in the carport than on your husband's head in the kitchen. Bobby. But there's no. Yeah. Have a good cry. Cry does not mean you do not trust God. It means I'm getting it out. It's tears are doing for me what the tears did for Mary. cried, her vision got cleared. It was Jesus. You cry, your vision is cleared. There'll be Jesus right there. Trust that doesn't require answers. God, what are you doing? Why are you allowing this to happen? God, I never thought we would be here. God, God, like as if God is responsible for answering our questions. That's like people who say, no, I prayed and God didn't say anything. He has that right. But first, before we say he didn't say anything, let's think about maybe not we weren't listening. I think one of the funniest occurrences in the Bible is baptism. He comes up out of the water and a dove comes from heaven. An actual voice says, "This, my beloved Son, God said that loud enough everybody could hear. They all turned to each other and said, was that lightning? Look it up. See, sometimes it doesn't take God speaking for you to hear God speak. Sometimes it takes you wanting to hear what he's got to say. When you want to hear what he's got to say, you won't listen. But he can talk all day long, and if you're not wanting to hear it, not paying attention, you won't hear it, no matter how loud it is. Although I will tell you that it's been my experience that when I did listen, just to heat up. God doesn't owe me answers about life. When my wife, Michelle, came down with cancer, I marched my butt right straight into the throne room. We were living in Marshall. Circle Drive in Marshall. Two-car carport. Wasn't enclosed, but two-car carport. I found out she had cancer. I went out there and threw temper tantrum. Then I said, what are you doing? He spoke to me as clear as I'm talking. It wasn't audible. He spoke to me as clear as I'm talking to you, and he said, that ain't the question. The question is, what are you doing? I stayed on that carport until I said, if she lives, I trust her. If she passes, I trust her. Blessed be the name. It impresses Jesus a trust that doesn't struggle against God. Psalm chapter 40, verse 8. It's not on your notes, it just came to my mind. Psalm chapter 40, verse 8. I delight to do thy will, O God. When you tell me to pray for my enemies, I'm not going to struggle against you. I delight to do your will. When you say to me, do not return evil for evil, I'm not going to struggle against you. I'm not going to return evil for evil. When you say, if you're asked to go 1 mile, go 2, I'm not going to struggle against you. I'm going to go a 2nd mile. When you say forgive, I'm not going to struggle against you. I'm going to forgive. I delight, oh God, to do your will, David said. I want to be, Psalm chapter 40, verse 8, Christian. Trust that remembers this relationship, one between you and Jesus, is more important than any other. More important than the one you got with your dad, your mother, your sister, your spouse, children. No such thing as a relationship more important than the one you have with Jesus. As a matter of fact, after I had finished, and I was reviewing this, I found where Jesus said this identical same thing, just a little different way. There went a great multitude. Oh, you can put this in your notes if you want to. It's in John chapter 14, verses 25 through 27. That reads this way: there were great multitudes with Jesus, and Jesus turned. And this is what he said. Jesus had a great way of thinning the crowd, thinning church out. He could cut a church membership slam in half with just one statement. This is what he did right here. If any man come to me and hate not his father and his mother, his wife, his children, his brethren, his sisters, and even his own life, cannot be. What is Jesus saying? Did he want you to hate your dad? No, he's a good guy. I like him. No, what he's saying is, I want you to understand that your relationship with me is more important. We live securely in our relationship with Jesus. We're getting along with our dad. Why? Because every argument is where someone has decided to not act like Jesus. I hate the day I heard that. Well, I passed the pain on to you. Trust that is willing to be patient. God does not run, jump, and fetch. It's not the cosmic Santa Claus. Sometimes he says yes, sometimes he says no, sometimes he says later. I would prefer the first two over the last one any day of the week, because this is not my strong suit. But sometimes trust is matured by being patient. Sometimes we just have to say, okay, God, are you ready? Let me know. Drop it in his lap and walk off. And when he's ready, he'll come get you, because I promise you he knows where you are. And I'll just remind you of what you already know. To everything there's a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. There's a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that. Time to heal, time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, respect of what the Baptists say, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time for there to be tough love and refrain. A time to get, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to keep silent, a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8 describe your life. Sure, it's a pretty poem by Solomon. It's a pretty poem. But what I see is a mirror of my own life. And in my life, there are seasons. In my life, there are purposes. And I guess the hardest one I have is there's a time to keep silent. But all of you, we're going to suffer from the same. I want it. The name is God. I want it, God. How are you saved? Thought about winning her trust. Thought about how to win her trust over. She may have thought that when she answered the phone that I started talking, but I didn't. When she answered the phone, I started reading what I'd written in my head. Because I'm working towards a goal, I'm trying to press her. My hope was that if somebody else comes along and says I'm interested in doing food, then what she would say is, whether she recognizes having been impressed or not, that she will say to herself, okay, then, I'm sorry, I already have somebody else interested. See, even at 67, figure out praise, which is okay. Nothing wrong with that. It's not like I lied. In fact, I told her the truth. I said, man, I'm calling you early because I want to jump to the front of the line. I said, I don't think there's a line yet, but I'm afraid there might be one at some point. If at that point there is a line, I want to be at the front. What is important, what has eternal value, is a life dedicated to the presence of Jesus. With compassion and humility and trust. In the Baptist church we sang, trust and obey, for there's no other way. To be happy in Jesus, trust. I want Jesus to continue to be a blessing. Stop the policies and things. Look at my child trusting me. It took me years to get him there. It took me years to get him there. But look at him try. I stand before him one day. I'm not talking about getting depressed so that I get to go to heaven. We're not talking about going to heaven. What we're talking about is I'm going to live on the side of it. The side of that, I want to capture his attention with my compassion. What little there is, I can feel it. My humility, what little of that there is. Little of it. My trust. What little there is that. Not to build my kingdom. As you taught me to pray, thy kingdom come, and your will be done in my life. Jesus, the Holy Spirit that resides within, who is the character builder. I lean on him. Not on my own love. Bless you for the life that you give. Precious. Would you please turn your may you be before God, Father, Jesus, who is your brother, Holy Spirit, your comforter, and mankind, your witness. May you be a peacemaker in this world. Your life abstain from deliberate injury to others. May your life prevent strife. May your life be a healer of breaches. May your life right wrongs, and may you work and live as to strengthen friendships that are both human and divine. God bless you. Have yourselves a great week. Happy Easter.